everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. It is Monday, June 17th, 2024. Happy belated Father's Day to all the great dads out there. I hope you had a beautiful day yesterday. You know, it's interesting. In the astrology, you can see the father in the children's birth chart. So the sun, planet sun, represents the father. And trust me, you can definitely see the father in the children's birth chart. So I hope the dads all had a great day. Wow, the summer solstice is upon us this Thursday, the 20th of June, around 1:51 p.m. I believe Jeff will clarify everything. The summer solstice hits us. And then the following day, Friday, the 21st, we have a full moon. So we've got a lot of powerful energies happening all at once. Let's get started, Jeff.
All right. Thanks for that. Yeah, this is a powerful full moon. No question about that, because it's happening right next to the solstice within 20 hours. And I got to tell you this, I've been examining this. Whenever you get the confluence of either a new or a full moon right next to an equinoctial or solstice point, very, very powerful. And it emphasizes the world. And I'll tell you even more the reason why. There's a nakshatra known as Mrigashira. It's a very powerful nakshatra because it is ruled by Mars. And this really gets into, it's very interesting to study the ancient lore of the Vedantic lunar mansions, because it's all about angels and deities. And of course, in the West, we call them angels. In the East, they called them deities. And this one actually rules a god known as Soma, which also is indicative of the moon. And what's so cool about this is Soma is all about creating things, but it's associated also with Jupiter, the god Brihaspati, which in ancient Vedantic lore is the third eye chakra. And the third eye chakra represents Jupiter, but more than that, it is also indicative of the force of life coming down into creation. So you've got the force of life or divinity raining down through the heavens, which is also kind of ruled by Jupiter in this nakshatra, as well as the moon, which is the crucible of creation. And of course, the cross, or you could say the earth, which represents sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, is the place where spirit manifests. So why this is so important is because the summer solstice is happening in this lunar mansion. And it has a lot to do with tensions. And because it's ruled by Mars, you could expect that there's a lot of dissatisfaction in the air right now. Look at the political scene, look at the world scene, look at the wars, look at all the crazy stuff going on. This, even on a personal level, depending on how this aspects in your chart, it can bring a sense of catalytic, or you could say dissatisfaction, that actually precipitates action. So it's a dynamic way of expressing the solstice. And because it's also right next to a full moon, literally the full moon happens 20 hours after the solstice. So it's like supercharging it. And for anybody that's not familiar, what is the solstice? It's where the sun peaks to its highest place in the northern hemisphere. It is why it's called the summer solstice. You see, at the equinoctial points, the days and nights are even. That's why they call it equinox, even, right? So the spring equinox and the fall equinox, the days and nights are even. That's where literally the sun's, or our orbit, you could say, meets the sun's orbit. That's why it's equal. And then, of course, the sun appears to go north in the northern hemisphere to its peak point, which is the summer solstice. And of course, the heat follows. That's when we get the heat of summer, right? Then the sun's gaining its strength in the following signs. So this is very powerful. I could go into a lot about the ancient lore of the lunar mansions, which is really fascinating stuff. The first 9 lunar mansions, which this is of, it's very powerful because the first 9 always represent the essences of creation. So this is very powerful, whether we're looking at an individual level or you're looking on a global level. We certainly have a lot of dissatisfaction, dissension, and craziness going on. It's an election year. We're 140 days away from the election. And of course, we see the polarization going on. This is where all the politicians, right, they start creating each other's viewpoints. And of course, we're going to see some serious stuff. We got a debate coming up on the 27th, which is going to be very interesting to see. So, and that's, of course, if you live in the United States. But even for the rest of the world, this is a very supercharged summer solstice. So, and full moons, again, is always when the seeds that were planted start to come to fruition. This brings it to boiling point. So this is a very dynamic one. And as we had been mentioning in the last couple podcasts, we have a very dynamic time coming up here through this summer into fall. Extremely powerful.
Well, so interesting that you mentioned dissatisfaction and then action, right? So the dissatisfaction can bring forth action, and that could be that full moon coming right in after the solstice, literally.
That's right. That's right. It precipitates action. And really, that's what that lunar mansion is all about. And what's so powerful about this, it's happening in what we call the fourth pada. See, pada is a strange word that just means there's 4 divisions per every lunar mansion. So this one's quite stacked. It's Mars and Moon and Rahu. So it tends to make people very polarized in their egoic sense of what they believe. You see, again, this is divinity in action, free will in action. You know, people say we don't have free will. Yes, we do. And the ancient astrology actually proves that. And this nakshatra is in essence about that. It's kind of like taking energy and concretizing it into your belief system. And of course, if it doesn't agree with ours or someone else's, we get dissatisfaction. So it's kind of a polarization energy. It's very powerful. See, the Soma is the deity of the moon, and she's always about creation, right? So this is a very dynamic energy when it's mixed with Mars. Mars is always referred to as a destiny disruptor. And I always talk about the law of 7, right? In the heat of the summer, there's 752 days throughout the year. And the heat of the summer is Mars, that 52 days. Actually, it's each 52-day period. So it's about 104 days after the spring equinox, we hit the Mars period. And Mars is the warrior. It either makes the things come to fruition that are happening, or it causes dissension. Doesn't care, takes action. So this is a powerful time of action. So we're going to see some very dynamic times here coming up. And, you know, again, this can be positive too. It's catalytic is what it is.
Well, if we look at where the full moon is happening in our personal chart, right, that will give us a sense of direction in terms of not necessarily how to handle all of this energy, but maybe where to focus our energy.
That's exactly right. When you look at the house and aspects that it makes in your birth chart, very, very, the house is, of course, the area of life that it's going to focus on. And then the aspects are the dynamics that are going on. So yeah, this is very, very powerful. See, the solstice happens when it's 6th from the moon in a sidereal zodiac. So this is change. This always precipitates change. It's also very positive for animals. So the 6th house rules animals. So it's a very dynamic time. And I would say, depending on where it is in your birth chart, it's catalytic. Again, it's going to bring action. So it's a good time to take action, good time to get on things and set goals and make things happen.
I love that. I love that you're saying it's positive time for animals, because we don't speak about animals very often. So what do you mean specifically when you say it's a positive time for them?
Well, oftentimes people might find their pets become more of an issue, or they might get a pet or something like that, or be thinking about it. So, it just puts a little energy on that when the solstice happens 6th from the moon. Why? Because 6th from the moon is pets and animals. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And like I brought up at the top of the show, how just wishing all the dads a good Father's Day, how we can see that the sun represents the father. That's in right. Children's birth chart. So we can see that all of these planets represent us as individuals, represent different energies. It's That's so right. Fascinating. So fascinating.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's fun stuff. And I have to tell you, another thing that's really important here is balancing your energy. Every time the solstices and the equinox happen, It's a wonderful time for cleansing, for also altering things, whether it's, doing body cleanses, reflexology, you do parasite cleanses, anything like that. These are powerful times of energetic change. The solstice is ushering in the summer. You see, where the energy, the arc of the sun is now growing, and it's very, very powerful. So this is a time in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, where things start to crescendo. It's a high energy period. Of course, the summer follows, right? It's really, it never ceases to amaze me, growing up in northern Wisconsin, where, you would see how cold it would get in the winter. Of course, you were in New York. So, these 4 seasons are so powerful, and they're marked by the 4 points of the sun in the northern hemisphere. And the same thing in the southern, it's just reversed, right? So the spring equinox is when the snow is melting, the birdies are chirping. The summer solstice is when energy is now full in power. The sun is now gaining its life force strength, and the whole, elements of creation are all now coming to fruition. We see the crops start growing in the field, right? We feel the energy. It's getting hot. We're all heading to the beach or doing whatever we're doing. It's summertime, right? And this will go on until the fall equinox, when the sun now gets to its even point again and starts to go under towards its lowest point, which is the winter solstice. So the days are longer and everything else. So it's very, very powerful. So it's a wonderful time, again, to be thinking about what you want to do and setting goals.
Jeff, I really think it's important to share with everyone the talismans that you make, because they're so specific to the individual's birth chart energies and how helpful these pieces are, especially during this time. And there's no better time than on the summer solstice. We're talking about rings and necklaces. And I'd like you to speak a little bit about the difference between wearing a ring or a necklace and how it affects the individual. But so important for us to understand how powerful these untreated gemstones that you work with can be.
Yeah, you bet. This started quite a long time ago. It's probably 38 years ago now or something, a long time ago, where I had a teacher say, Jeff, you should, try this gemstone. And I thought, well, what's he trying to do? Sell me a gemstone, right? And it was the same thing. I got into astrology, very skeptical. And I remember holding this yellow sapphire. And it was amazing. In fact, I'll put it on the screen here, the Curlian photography. You can just see the energy that it shows between me not holding a gem and holding a gem. And you can see my indentations are much, much brighter and more powerful. So this really got me on. I went, wow, I literally bought that yellow sapphire right on the spot. And that got me on a journey. And I started researching gemstones and also all kinds of things about gemology. And I met a gentleman many years ago. Now it's probably almost 30 years ago. He just passed away, and I'm still working with his wife. They're one of the largest distributors in North America. And it's wonderful because I get to see all the stuff coming in from all over the world here down at the 550 building. It's one of the largest gem centers in the world. And what's so interesting is I get to see how much stuff is lab grown and how much stuff is heat treated. And I can tell you, if you buy a lab grown gem and you'll jump on the internet and everybody and his brother is selling gemstones, got to be very careful, because so much stuff is infiltrated with lab-grown gems. And the problem is, if you buy a lab-grown gem, you might as well stand out on the porch and light your money on fire, because it's going to do nothing. People often say to me, does the gem have power? And I say, no, it doesn't. It resonates power. Think of a tuning fork. So if you had a pure tuning fork producing pure frequencies, this is exactly how gemstones work. You see, the crystalline nature is formed in the earth. There's 7 archangels that rule each of the planets. And I really think they have something to do with the formation of these minerals inside of the earth, just like everything else. All the human life, all the plant life, all the animal life, and all the mineral life comes from the angelic forces raining down on the earth. So gemstones were an ancient way to balance your energy. And what I do is I prescribe what we call Vedic Planetary Gemology. It's picking the right gemstone for you. It's not one shoe fits all. Just like our clothing, we all have to have it custom tailored or fit to us properly. So the gemstone you want to wear has to be examined. And then what I do is I prescribe that gem and I set them at a good astrological time to your birth chart, which is critical, because if that gem is not set at a good time to your birth chart, it can enhance a malefic energy. Even though the gem would be good for you, it still could put an odd energy on it. So I set it at a good astrological time, not only to your birth chart, but to the planet ruling the gems. This is called electional astrology. We're going to talk a lot about electional astrology in future podcasts. Electional astrology is picking an auspicious time when the heavens join at certain aspects to that planetary energy. And it also needs to match your birth chart. So there's a two-step process. I cast the metal at a good time, and then secondly, I will set the gem to your birth chart. And then there's a process of cleansing, which is really cool. You cleanse it 3 times with spring water, pass it over incense 3 times, you pass it above a flame 3 times, and then you set it down on what we call an angelic square known as a yantra. Yantras are also synonymous with angelic square, and you charge the gem with your third eye chakra and a prayer known as a mantra with intentions. Very, very powerful. And I have to say, you've experienced gems. I've experienced gems. They're really, really powerful. And I have so many clients that have come back and said, wow, I can really feel a difference. It's subtle, but extremely powerful. And one of my favorite, I do a lot of rings for people, but I find one of the most powerful places is to wear it at the heart chakra. And I have to say, the heart chakra is where your lungs, your oxygenation of your blood, and your breath is always passing by. And it's a wonderful place to wear it energetically. And there's also other corrective measures known as mantras and various different yantras. But I find in the Western hustle and bustle of life, gemstones really seem to have the most power, even though mantras can do it, and they do help a lot. But I find a gemstone set to you that's natural and is right for your chart. And there's certain gems you want to wear all your life and other gems you want to wear during specific time periods called doshas. So I'm glad you brought that up, Ella, because it's a powerful way to enhance your energy. And I have to say, I've had many people come back and tell me so.
Clearly. So I'm wondering about the energy of this solstice and it potentially supporting all of the ugliness that we see happening right now, supporting the wars, supporting all of the disaster. Can it do something like that? I mean, I don't know if I'm phrasing this question to you correctly.
Well, you actually are. And yeah, I get exactly what you're asking. Yes, it could stir the pot and is likely to, because remember, I told you that the lunar mansion, it's ruled by Mars, and it tends to bring life force energy of creation, which is free will. It strengthens it. And when you have a full moon that close to the solstice, that exacerbates tensions and emotions, right? Because remember, full moons bring things to fruition. And you have to remember, we've also been speaking about Uranus every 84 years in the sidereal zodiac goes into that sidereal sign of Taurus. And it's going to move with Mars conjoining Uranus, which is very volatile, right in the middle of July. And again, I think it's the 16th of July, we have the second Pluto return on the United States. So globally, we're seeing tensions mount. There's no question about it. And of course, I've even heard China is rattling sabers even more around Taiwan. And there's all different opinions about how that's going to end up. Again, in the current news right now, I'm hearing more and more things bubbling. I mean, now we're hearing that Israel could be having a much bigger problem with Hezbollah and Iran backing it. So things are cooking. Plus, things are very, very strong. Biden just signed a deal now that gives Ukraine 10 years of support. Nice that he checked with us before, now Ukraine has this unequivocal support from our tax dollars. And it's very, very interesting what's going to happen here. I mean, we are clearly in a very dangerous time here with the world, with the weaponry that's at play right now. It's a very dangerous time for us. And again, I mentioned the petrodollar has just now expired, the deal with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. And you don't hear a word about this on the news. Nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. And yet, The petrodollar, which has been in place for the better part of 70 years, has now expired. And this is very powerful. And I'm hearing, again, more and more rumblings of housing market crashes, insolvencies of banks. I just heard from some very reliable sources that there may be up to 52 plus banks failing, and the bigger banks are going to come and gobble them all up. So again, you follow the money. And Russia has just now declared they want no USD on any of their exchanges anymore whatsoever. And I've heard the same thing is now starting to matriculate over in the Middle East with the OPEC nations. So again, we're seeing the sabers and the rattling of war again. Very dangerous time. I think George Carlin might have said it best. He said, and I'll add a little bit to this, war is when the demons that possess the old men in business suits send young people off to war. And that's my version. I added demons in there because I really have to say, so many people I've talked to who are now gone, who used to be involved with World War II, the Korean War, so on and so forth. Then Clint Eastwood is, again, he was in the Korean War. And that's, look at him, he's 93 years old. So you'd have to be pretty old to be involved in World War II. I worked for a guy who was a drill sergeant in World War II. And, nobody was happy about that war. And it's good that we fought it. We certainly didn't want someone like Hitler to win, that's for darn sure. But it's really interesting when you look at the roots of all this thing and where does it all get funded from? The bankers that fund both sides. And no matter how you slice it, I've actually seen this directly. And it's very dangerous stuff, how countries always tend to end up in conflicts, and innocent people who had nothing to do with the roots of that conflict end up fighting and dying for it. And of course, they have to for the countries. You got to give them a lot of credit for that. But on the other hand, I look at the roots of where all this stuff comes from, and it's really saddening that it has to go there and that we can't find a more diplomatic and more intelligent solution at this point in the evolution of society. And I actually think we're going to get there. Edgar Cayce had talked about this. He saw us living to many hundreds of years. And I had mentioned many times about the ages and the yugas. Sri Yukteswar talked about this. And a lot of astrologers will tell you, oh, we're in the Aquarian age. Well, it certainly doesn't seem like the Aquarian age to me. Does it to you, Ella? And anyhow, what is important here is I think we are going to get there in a couple of hundred years if the math is right. And we're definitely in a couple thousand years going to move into a very high level age. And then about 4,000 years, then we're going to hit the golden age. And this seems to happen about every 25,900 something years. Some people say it's 25,700. But however you slice and dice this, we appear to go around this great, what they call year, just short of 26,000 years. And again, I always mention there's no death, even though everyone tells us there is. And yes, there certainly is to the physical body and to the reality as we know it. But the soul does not die, and neither does the spirit of Psyche, in my opinion. And it's very interesting how the earth is a soul cauldron. And the ancient astrology shows it to the T. It's very interesting. It's a place of free will. It's a place of karmic experience, and also where we get to play out our experience in reality. Very powerful stuff.
A lot of hits coming right now. A lot of hits coming right now. So important to stay in the moment, for us to stay in the moment. I was listening, I always listen to Eckhart Tolle. I was listening to him this morning, and he was talking about the importance of staying in the moment and how we can't let our minds go racing all over the place, because that just causes more confusion for everything, but specifically to our own selves, because then we can't really see our not way out, but see the truth in what's happening and how to protect ourselves and to do something good for ourselves if we let our minds just race all over the place. Being in the moment is such tremendous power. It has such tremendous power. It pretty much blows my mind, honestly. It really, really does.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that, again, you have to remember, astrology isn't predicting the future. It's energy, folks. It's just energy. In science and physics, what do? We look at a phenomena. If we can find it to be repeatable, we know, or its phenomena has an effect, we observe it, right? Well, when we look at what does the solstice really mean? Well, shows a lot of free will at play. Well, free will also has to be connected to consciousness, right? If your free will is to go rob somebody, well, that's not too high level, is it? But that's free will. And, if your consciousness is to stay in your spot and not let this crazy world drive you insane, that's also free will too. So again, it's all energy. To summarize this, I would say this is an exceedingly dynamic, powerful time of free will. Be careful what we wish for, and be careful what we truly desire. And staying centered in the moment, like you were just mentioning with Eckhart Tolle, Sri Yukteswar talked about the same thing. So did Krishnamurti. So many other, many wonderful, the Christian message, the Jewish message, the Hindu message, they all have the same thing, no matter which religion you go into. You look at the true avatars of these religions, they all said the same thing. Stay in your space, stay centered. And this is a time where it's very powerful. And of course, everyone's going to feel it differently depending on where it is in your chart and also where we are in our headspace. In other words, where we are in our perception of reality.
True. So true. So true. Man. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks everyone for joining us on Mondays. Have a beautiful week ahead. Enjoy the summer solstice, the full moon. Take good care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week.